So welcome to my deck tech on Blue White Red Control. So this is basically a counter, draw cards, remove things kind of deck. Our main win condition is Ral is at Viceroy Emblem, so that's whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we'll do 4 damage to any target and draw 2 cards. This in combination with Nexus of Fate kind of allows us to go infinite until eventually we'll kill our opponent. I realised in my original build of this deck, where I only played 2 Nexus of Fate, that I actually could kill myself via drawing too many cards, but 3 Nexus of Fate means that it's not really possible, so we can just loop this Nexus with draw 2, keep discarding them, and they'll keep going back into our deck, so we'll always have 2 cards in our deck. In the one case where I only had 2 copies, I had to do some Teferi shenanigans to bounce Ral back into my deck. Fortunately, I had 2 Teferis, so I could do that a couple of times and managed to actually just about burn my opponent out. But not recommended, so that was why the 3rd Nexus of Fate was added in place of Integrity/Intervention. So for the early game, we've got a mixture of counter spells, so we've got Essence Scatter for creatures, we've got some cheap card draw, Radical Idea, just draw a card, jumpstart, lets us kind of like ship it with things like Searchlight Canter, so if we don't want to, we might not necessarily want Radical Idea, so we can just bin it and possibly flash it back later when we get excess lands. We've got a couple of Justice Strikes here as a way of dealing mainly with bigger green kind of creatures like Vigilant Baloth, which might resolve. It's pretty good removal. Doesn't hit some things like Boros Challenger, so it's like harder to cast than Lightning Strike as well. So, but again, it hits much bigger things than Lightning Strike, so that's why we've got a couple of those. For the extra cards, so Disdainful Stroke, very strong, counters things like Crackling Drake, Heroic Reinforcements, most Planeswalkers. Anticipate for a bit more extra card filtering. And for the rest of the instant speed package, we have a couple of hard counterspells. So we've got a mixture of Sinister Sabotage and Ionize. Sinister Sabotage Surveil lets us bin excess lands or bin spells that we don't want, or bin Nexus of Fate, so it just shuffles back into our deck. 2 of those. Ionize is a bit easier to cast with our mana base, so 2 of those deals a bit of damage, though we don't really care about that. And then for the final instance, we have 3 copies of Chemist's Insight. Again, works well with counterspells, works well with just putting it in the graveyard of things like Search. It's very strong. Also, works with Ral's Plus, so we can take a land and put this in our graveyard if we really wanted to. A lot of value with this card. For our other instant is Invert/Invent. Invert can hit things like Electrostatic Field, but generally we're using Invent, so it's for an instant and a sorcery. So in terms of the sorceries we can look for, we've got 2 Divination, 2 Deafening Clarion, 2 Cleansing Nova. So basically we're usually hitting some Wrath or just some more incremental advantage of card advantage. So for the instant, we can hit a Nexus of Fate or a counterspell. Typically we'll go in for Nexus of Fate with these. So Deafening Clarion, it's mainly there for the kind of cases where we might need a really quick Wrath if we're against some high progressive deck. Typically we'd be wanting this against kind of mono red or Boros kind of decks, but it's not that great against Boros if they have Tajic, so possibly I would consider cutting 1 or maybe even both of these for extra Cleansing Novas, possibly 1 more instant speed kind of trick like a Lightning Strike. One of the problematic cards for this deck is not Galta, but Carnage Tyrant. We can't counter it, so our only way to deal with it is Wrath. We can't hit it with Justice Strike, so a 3rd or even 4th Cleansing Nova as insurance for this. Carnage Tyrants and other hex uncounterable threats which get through could be nice. Niv Mizzet's kind of annoying, but Justice Strike does deal with that one. Teferi's here, gives a bit more board control. It plays nicely with both Essence Scatter and Disdainful Stroke and Radical Idea and Anticipate and Justice Strike. So we can basically cast all of our instant speeds off Teferi. For the mana base, we've got full 4 Steam Vents, full 4 Sacred Foundry, as you'd expect, full 4 Soul Falls, then just a couple of Glacier Fortresses, 1 Clifftop Retreat. You could play more of these. I like to have a reasonably high number of basics, so 9 basics here, good against Field of Ruin, if things like Assassin's Trophy hit our permanents, we can, always guarantee find a basic. Also 2 Memorials of Genius, just extra value land for grinding things out. Obviously Search can flip into a land, so technically we kind of have 27 lands, but we're never going to get 27 lands in play because of filtering with Ral and discarding to Jumpstart. But that's the deck. In terms of sideboard considerations, you could consider some cheap burn like Shocks, Lightning Strikes for red and Boros strategies. Also more counter spells for kind of counter burn, Grixis, mid-range decks, possibly extra Disdainful Strokes, definitely some negates, maybe some extra copies of Sinister Sabotage and or Ionize, possibly extra planeswalkers like Tezzeret, Artifice Master. But anyway, that's great. Let me know any comments and suggestions